evening, everyone. Thanks for those of you joining in the audience. We've got pretty much a full house here, which is great. I'm sure we have plenty of friends on Zoom. I would like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next regular Board of Education meeting is on Tuesday, October 25th at 7:30 p.m. in the board meeting room. Hard to believe we're already talking about the end of October. So I'll be brief on the chairperson's report. I will say I'm sure Alan will follow up, but NIASC was here today. And I know several board members participated in that up at the high school. So that's important work that's being done, and that's exciting. I'm sure the super will fill us in a little on that. I think it's very exciting. Eric is an old friend from the cafeteria expansion way back when, the team over there. So we look forward to hearing that. And I know it was not here at the last meeting. Thank you, Vice Chair McCammon, for handling that. But I do want to say we continue to appreciate all the feedback, all the emails that are coming into the board as we continue to work through some of the initiatives that have been put forth. There's a lot of work that's been done behind the scenes, a lot of work done over the summer around the Director of Health and the change to some security protocols. And I see Chief Anderson here, who's been a true community partner in working with the administration around the security protocols that we're looking at. So thank you. And I think this is, I don't know, your third or fourth meeting. So thanks for your time. It's important. And the questions are important, and we'll continue to answer those questions. But also with security, we have to be careful as to what we all want to know and what we all need to know. It's become a challenging world out there, and things continue to happen, not just at home and in the States, but abroad. So it's one of those things where I personally firmly believe we have to lead and do the right thing when it comes to protecting our students, our families, and our staff. So we'll continue to do that and place safety and security at the top of our list for our students in all that we do. And I'm excited to move forward and start to see kind of the realization of Hindley Homes and Royal. So with that, Michelle, I will turn it over to public comment, and we will start with folks in the audience.
Good evening. For participants in person, please wait for the chairperson to acknowledge and call each participant to the microphone. You will have up to 3 minutes to comment. Please state your name and address.
Anyone from the audience here? Okay. Anyone on Zoom, Michelle?
Miss Amy Daniels, you are unmuted and recognized.
Can you hear us, Miss Daniels?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
We can. Thank you so much.
All right, good evening. My name is Amy Daniels, and I live at 83 Locust Hill Road. I have a sophomore at DHS and a sixth grader at Middlesex. I'm a board member of the Darien Depot and the Thriving Youth Task Force, and serve as DEI chair for the Middlesex Parents Association. I'm a past Tokenie PTO chair and previously served on the Council of Darien School Parents as nominating chair and community chair. Tonight's remarks are my own. I'd like to start by thanking the Board of Education members for their tireless work that each of you puts into our schools, our community, and our children. You do it without pay and often without recognition. And we know that you guys bring much passion and a lot of time to your role. I'd also like to thank the volunteers at each of our 7 PTO organizations. Our schools are among the very best in the nation, with active school communities, engaged students, and satisfied teachers. So much of this is a byproduct of the PTO chairs, vice chairs, committee members, and parent volunteers. From fundraising for field trips and enrichment programming, to showing appreciation to our teachers, spearheading events, and communication channels to create a robust school community. These volunteers are a key piece of the puzzle in the functioning of our school districts. The truth is that right now, many of our PTO volunteers feel under attack. They fear speaking up at meetings and their words being taken out of context. I've heard rumors of a secret society of parents. It would be laughable if it weren't so caustic and detrimental to our schools' abilities to attract strong PTO representation. The CDSP and our PTOs are not and never have been affiliated with any political party, nor should they be. It's a shame that CDSP felt they had to close their meetings in order to protect their members and get their work done without being attacked. Their meetings should be open, productive meetings. The purpose of the CDSP, and I quote, is to promote understanding and communication between the Darien Public Schools, the home, administrators, the Board of Education, and the community with the goal of uniting to provide an academically robust and socially supportive school system that enables our children to achieve their individual potential. There is a secret to being involved in our PTOs and the CDSP. Parents need to show up. They need to volunteer their time and volunteer their talents and not just throw stones from the sidelines. Our PTO volunteers must be protected from being pawns in the political discourse. They must be empowered to do the work needed to continue the mission of our PTOs. And the Board of Ed and administration should work to protect this vital asset of our school community. I look forward to the work.
Almost at time, Ms. Daniels.
Great, I'm wrapping up. I look forward to the work of the BOE Communications Committee and the continued role of our PTO.
You're at time, Ms. Daniels.
Thank you.
Thanks for speaking this evening.
Corey Veazey, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi,
Can you hear
my
us?
name is, sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, so my name is Corey Veazey. I'm a resident of 13 Lake Drive, and I am speaking about the plan, the HHR committee's plan to expand parking at Holmes School. I have concerns with this plan. First, I don't believe that incremental parking will resolve the perceived problems with traffic or congestion on the adjacent streets. That being said, if the committee decides to move forward with the expanded parking, I and my neighbors have concerns with it, specifically drainage, light pollution, noise pollution, creating a blind zone in the parking lot, and creating dangerous children crossing situation from kids entering the school from Lake Drive and Echo in the northern part of Hoyt. And thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to speak. That's everything.
Thank you for speaking this evening.
Richard Grimm, you are unmuted and recognized.
Richard, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
We can hear you.
Great.
Go ahead. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks for your time. I'm also responding to agenda item 8A, specifically for homeschool and the plans for including parking. Just quick introduction. I've lived on Lake Drive adjacent to homeschool for about, over 15 years. I've had 3 of 3 children attend homeschool. I've had 3 of 3 children take courses in the modular classrooms. So I'm well aware of the issues and applaud the move to resolve taking away those modular classrooms and for the overall development of homeschool. I do take issue with putting parking where it looks like it's being contemplated, taking away green space from the town, including the property that is 32 Hoyt Street today to lay asphalt for additional parking. I think it's unnecessary. To Mr. Veazey's points, I don't think it's going to resolve perceived problems, and I do think it creates a number of negative effects. I guess first on the functional, as Mr. Veazey had commented, we on Lake Drive as well as Phillips have lived with the fact that people will line up before and after school, certainly during special events along the street. And while it creates congestion, it's not perfect. It's worked for over 15 years, and I'm witness to that, having lived through it. There are bottlenecks around the parking lot. Adding parking at the very back of the parking lot, again in this green space, won't solve that. In fact, it'll compound the problems of traffic coming in and out off of Hoyt Street. And I think, again, the people that are lining up on the adjacent streets won't be going into the parking lot because they're there to avoid being in that parking lot. The next point, again, laying asphalt just does create some real drainage and runoff concerns. Even going back to, that property, 32 Hoyt Street, was zoned residential since the 1950s. And Even when there was a structure there, now it's complete green space, but when there was a structure, it was a minority of that 0.23 acre lot that was impermeable surface. We're now talking about making a drastic change to this. I also did want to comment around the light and noise pollution. Again, this is contemplated in an area that going back to the 1950s has not existed. And so that should be a real concern. And I would say where adjacent homeowners in the arguments for stadium lights, I think rightfully should have expected some light and noise there next to the high school. You are changing the use of this property.
Mr. Grimm, you're almost at time.
Thank you. For residential. Another point on the blind zone. This property, if you know it, is below grade. So if you're putting parking down there,
You're at time, Mr. Grimm.
attracting
You're at time.
nefarious activity. Thank you for
Thank
your
you, Mr. Grimm.
consideration.
Mr. Grimm, may I have your address, please, for the record?
Yes, it's 11 Lake Drive.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Just a point of clarity, if there are more folks speaking specific to Hindley Homes and Royal, that's great. We welcome hearing you. Just so people understand that the town formed a building committee, and the building committee is executing on the renovations of these schools. And the building committee works with the town, with planning and zoning, with architectural review board. The building committee is just executing on the education specs that we sent the building committee. So your comments are important, as the vice chair here is also on the building committee, and KG&D and the building committee is here to listen, but they also have meetings where they have public comment also. So just want to make sure everyone gets their thoughts heard with their concerns with anything going on around those schools. But it is not the purview of the Board of Ed now that it's been turned over to a building committee. But we welcome to hear your comments. Thank you. Go ahead, Michelle.
Ms. Teresa Vogt, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi, Teresa Vogt, 22 Circle Road. I have two kids, both are graduates of the Darien school system. Tonight, I am actually speaking as a former volunteer for our schools. I am a former PTO chair. I'm a former CDSP rep. I am a former nominating chair for a PTO. And if any of you had kids who ever went to my school with my kids at Tokenique, Middlesex, or Darien High School, you probably know my name, because I am the person who sent you a million emails, because I did the directories at all three of those schools my entire time at those schools. I watched the communications meeting on Friday, and I've been watching a lot of attacks on our PTOs and on our volunteers. And this is a town that thrives on its volunteers. To hear Board of Ed members go onto social media or in meetings criticize our PTOs is so utterly disappointing. I can tell you, as an RTM member, being a member of the RTM is so much easier than being a PTO volunteer. The amount of time our volunteers on the PTOs put into those roles, they should basically get paid. As a nominating chair, I can assure you, whenever I asked people for help, I did not go searching their political affiliation. All I asked was that they read the email, understand what the job description was, and just work hard. Didn't care if they were Democrat, Republican, or unaffiliated. Nobody cares your political affiliation. All we care is that you read the email, raise your hand to volunteer, and put the work in. So these attacks on our PTOs and our volunteers, it's simply, I just don't understand them. And I really hope that they stop. Thank you.
Miss Amanda Callahan, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi, my name is Amanda Callahan. I spoke at the last meeting. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Amanda. Go ahead.
I just wanted to follow up by first thanking, of course, the BOE and everyone who has put so much effort into researching this issue of increasing school security, especially in the elementary schools. I was hugely impressed with the amount of work and dedication that you guys put towards researching this issue this summer, especially by going to visit Newtown and seeing what kind of security systems they had in place in their elementary schools. I also wanted to thank the PTO members and chairs and volunteers at all of the elementary, middle school, and high school. I think you guys do an amazing job, and I fully support and am behind all of the volunteer efforts and extra work that you do. All of you, thank you so much. As you know, what I mentioned in my last statement, if you may remember, that a mass shooting has directly impacted my family and our family. And I just wanted to follow up with my last statement with one anecdote from my relative who was a survivor of a mass shooting. While by no means I'm trying to be a spokesperson, nor is she for survivors of mass school shootings, she did tell me that I could share her sentiments on this BOE meeting. So when I asked her about her thoughts on having armed security guards in elementary schools, I said, would she be in favor of this? She said yes. And she said, well, I do not want to issue a formal statement that could be put on record and searchable, which I completely understand, nor do I want to be a spokesperson for any survivors. She said, I will say that now my current school district has made the move to armed school resource officers. It has been a really great transition. The officer visited every classroom, interacts really nicely with parents and students, and I can tell they go with another level of training with the regular grounds checks and the safety protocols now in place. Thank you, and thank you again. That's it.
Thank you.
John Lindell, you are unmuted and recognized.
Sure. Hopefully you can hear me.
Hear you, John.
Good. Hi, I'm John Lindell. I live at 7 Lake, and I just wanted to echo what Mr. Vici and what Mr. Grimm said. I was somewhat involved in the process when the town was acquiring the land near Holmes School, and had concerns at the time. And I think that the primary concern of the people driving the town's purchase was safety. And I can tell you that the property that is located there now, that is, I know it's currently under town control, possibly Board of Ed control in the future, has been a safety hazard over the last couple of years. The main concern I have is that, we have a lot of kids that walk down Lake Drive and come from the north, and they go up those stairs and they walk across that parking lot, and additional parking is just going to create even more of a safety hazard and create more of a crowding in the parking lot. I would echo what Richard said. I don't have concerns with people parking along Lake Drive or along Phillips Lane. I've lived on both Phillips and Lake. For special events and things like that, I think that minor inconvenience, outweighs the added inconvenience and safety hazard of additional parking and expanding that parking lot. I do agree the school needs to be expanded. I've had 3 kids go through it myself, but the parking situation is my gravest concern. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
There are no more raised hands at this time.
Good. Thank you, Michelle. We will go on to the superintendent's report.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see everyone participating, either remotely and particularly in person this evening. Thank you. I just want to recognize right off the top, if we could, congratulate, we're not going to name them all, and we didn't bring them to the meeting, but we certainly congratulate our 24 Darien High School senior students for being commended students in the 2020-23 National Merit Scholarship Program. These are in addition to the 4 semi-finalists that we shared with the board at their last meeting. I also want to recognize Katie Gale. Katie is a teacher, 4th grade teacher down at Henley. And Katie was representing Darien Education Association and the Connecticut Education Association as she did some educational advocacy down at the Capitol. This is a true selfie, just for the record. She had a camera and she asked the president, would you like to photograph with me? And he said, sure, let me take a photograph of both of us. So it's actually her phone that they're actually using. So there you go. She had a good time, and we appreciate her advocacy on behalf of all of Connecticut's school children. Out of the Darkness Community Walk will be on Saturday, October 22nd. For those who would like to participate, it's hosted by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and there's a variety of communications that have gone out that will provide the links to that information. I want to recognize Principal Dunn and the high school administration staff and students for their organization of today's and tomorrow's NEASC collaborative visit. The purpose of that visit is to collect qualitative and quantitative information about the complete educational experience for our students and for our staff at the school, and therefore to sort of identify areas of continued growth and improvement. The next visit, which is really every 10 years, is the spring of 24. So this is in preparation of that. Thank you to Mrs. Parent, also Mr. Mahoney, and Ms. McCammon for representing the board on that meeting today. Members of central service staff joined the board members for that interview, and I think it was well received, and a lot of continuity was presented to the committee. So stay tuned. But that was a very productive first full day for the staff. John, I don't know if you saw them in classes, in your classes or not, but maybe you can share with us later. Well, the annual Tokenique Pumpkin Fair is up and running again. It'll be nice to see everybody back out again. We did have it obviously last October, but it'll be nice to see. Hopefully we get good weather this weekend. We have received the Kerma audit report. They will be in district working with administrators on October 20th to go over that for each of the schools. Thereafter, once it's been reviewed and is accurate, we'll bring it to the board in executive session for review. We have some testing going on at the school, but I think John's going to talk to that on behalf of our students. Dr. Mark Brackett, who did the convocation. Mark is the founder and director of the Yale Intelligence Center for Intelligence, and he's also the author of Permission to Feel and the creator of Ruler. I'm pleased that Mark was well received by the staff, and he has agreed to conduct a parent workshop in the auditorium for us. So he's pleased to work with the district and provide his time and services. And I think that will be a nice opportunity to continue the continuity of wellness, SEL, mental health, and so on. So stay tuned. We'll have to sort of settle on a date, but we'll do that as quickly as we possibly can. The next DEI meeting is Monday, the 17th. We have curriculum on the Thursday, the 13th, policy, the 14th, and finance, the 20th. Thank you.
Thank you. I would say Mark was captivating at the convocation, so I'm happy to see that he's coming back to the district. That's great. We'll move on to student representatives reports. I know Swaha is not able to make it this evening, but John Raskoff is
She
here.
is unfortunately not. Good evening, everyone. First announcement, as Dr. Hadley mentioned, junior PSAT in-school day is tomorrow. For anyone that has not already been told by their freshman, sophomore, or senior, they do have the morning off, which is a lovely little thing. Spirit Week at DHS starts next week. We have a whole bunch of costume themes. My favorite, of course, is Dress Like a Grandpa Day. Student government is holding its second annual trunk or treat on October 23rd. All clubs and sports teams and student organizations are setting up games and crafts and activities for Darien kids in all the elementary schools and younger, and it's going to be a total blast. It was really fun last year. We're hoping to get even more turnout this year. Student Gov is also holding a Battle of the Bands on October 28th, where bands in the DHS community, so students and teachers, we have at least one known faculty band that's signed up, and it's going to be really fun. They're going to take part in a competition to win a spot performing at a future high-profile DHS event. We don't know what it is yet, but it sounds appealing.
Graduation sounds good.
Right? School news. The first quarter ends on October 28th, which will line up perfectly with a wellness weekend we have starting the day after that will run through Halloween weekend to the following Tuesday. What that means is students don't have any homework collection or tests on Monday and Tuesday. They can still have assignments that they might be doing over the weekend. They're just not due until at least Wednesday. And finally, the fall drama is just over a month away now. A poster was chosen this morning, so promo stuff will be appearing around the town very shortly. Just as a reminder, it's The Tempest, and it will play on November 17th, 18th, and 19th at 7 p.m. in the DHS auditorium. Thank you.
Have you gotten your role yet in that production?
Well, I'm actually not acting it in it. I'm
sure it'll
composing
be
the
fantastic.
original soundtrack, but
Thank you, John. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the special meeting and regular meeting held on September 27th, 2022? Mr. Roney, second by Mrs. Best. All those in favor? It's unanimous. We'll move on to board committee reports. We'll move on to presentations and discussions. We have the presentation on the Hindley, Holmes, and Royal Building.
Okay.
Oh, yep. Sorry, committee. We'll right through that. Any committee reports? Mrs. Achman, sorry.
Quickly,
policy committee does meet on the 14th. I'll be putting out a quorum call to the policy committee to make sure you don't make it. But if you cannot, please let me know. So Mrs. Sy and I have time to figure out exactly how many people will be there or what we need to do. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Hoffman.
Our curriculum committee will meet on Thursday morning.
Great. Thank you. Mrs. McCammon.
Communications had their first meeting on Friday. We're really excited. Thanks to the communications committee members for being there. We started with our sort of founding documents, including the board roles and responsibilities, the strategic plan, and the board goals set out for the year, because those are the underpinnings of all of our work. We went from there to talk about ideas for a charge. When we meet next month, we'll talk about an actual crafting an actual charge. We wanted to do that slowly and deliberately because communications is such a wide topic. We could end up all over the place if we're not careful. So we're taking our time with it, and we will bring it back to the board. After that, we talked about possible next steps and working towards what we know we want to do. And we are talking about certainly creating a communication plan and also possibly kicking off with a survey, but we don't have any specifics on either of those things. We will, in our next meeting, be more specific about what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Thank you. Any other board committee reports? There is an Oxrich Building Committee meeting tomorrow at 10 o'clock. I believe the old school is thoroughly decommissioned. We found an old septic tank. Luckily, it was not contaminated with anything. So we're working through that. No real delay or anything on that. It was a good thing to find as we were doing footings. And we continue to move forward on phase 2 of the Oxrich Building Committee. So now we'll move on to presentations and discussions. A is a mouthful. Presentation on Hinley Holmes Royal Building Committee, schematic designs and possible action on the schematic designs. Request to the Board of Selectmen for acquisition, custody, and control of 32 Hoyt Street, which is the former Curtis property. So this is exciting. I know the HHR committee has been hard behind the scenes, have presented at the RTM, and it's just a great committee that's moved fast forward. And like being part of Oxrich, talking about it and then seeing it on the screen is pretty incredible. And we have some good partners and old friends of the town in KG and D Architects. We've got Eric here, and Travis is also here. Welcome back. And so we're excited to hear about that. So we're going to go through the schematic designs, and then we have a couple of motions which we'll talk through when we get there, but we'll go through the deck. So Eric, Travis, I'll turn it over to you.
May I, Mr. Chairman, just for a quick?
Yes, sure.
All right, good evening, nice to see you. And I just wanted to mention our principals in the room. And before we get up and running about this, it's just the excitement in the district, and particularly around these schools and their communities around the development of these projects is just palpable. And sometimes, we gloss over things real quickly that don't stop to appreciate some of the things we're doing and some of the good things that are going on. So I just wanted the board to know that your good work behind the scenes and the community's work and the work of this committee. Obviously, Ms. McCammon as chair, but I also want to particularly point out this evening, Chris, Mr. Price, who's done a super job co-chairing this. And I think everybody around this table understands what public services and meetings and all the praise and recognition you get for leading these things. But thank you, Chris, for your countless hours, and particularly for our children. So thank you, and for everyone in the community for the excitement that this has engendered. And I'll turn it over to Jill or Derek.
So thanks, Chris. I looked right through you in the audience there, but you've been great to work with on these meetings. And I will say too, for the principals that are there that I know have participated, and thank you. If you want to know where the 25th hour and the 8th day was found, talk to Luke Forshore, who has done a yeoman's job and an incredible job of working through building a school from the ground up in phases. So we couldn't do it without our principals, and Luke's a great example of what can be done working with the local neighbors and the community and the town. So thank you all. Eric, it's yours.
Terrific. Well, thanks for having us tonight. I'm here with Travis Schnell from KG Architects and Joe Canis from Ty and Bond. Dr. Adley, you sort of stole a little bit of my thunder there. I want to thank the building committee myself, as well as the principals, because we pretty much over the course of the last 4 months have met or spoken to each other on a weekly basis, going over issues, and this whole group has made this project significantly better. So thank you so much for participating and being active throughout this last 4 months.
Just as Eric goes through that, Eric has an abbreviated version of the presentation that was part of the board's packet, so there'll be a few slides that have been abbreviated.
I've been told to speak quickly, so I'll see how I do. But before I start, I will say that my daughter's field hockey team played here last week on the losing end. But after the game, all the girls walked past the cafeteria and they were all raving about the cafeteria. So now we have to build one up the street there as well.
She said my dad did that.
I wasn't there to witness that. So tonight we're going to go over our project goals, do the schematic design for the 3 elementary schools, briefly go through mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineering design, and follow up with a cost estimate review, and finally some of the approval schedule that's upcoming. These are the core recommendations and design guidelines that we, at every meeting that we've been to, we sort of restate because they're critical to make sure that this project is a success. First, eliminate the temporary portable classroom buildings. Renovate or construct new library learning commons. Correctly size general and special subject classrooms. Upgrade outdated building systems, primarily in the mechanical and electrical systems in the building. And the guidelines, ultimately, we want to create inspirational places of learning. Number 1, we want to integrate the Board of Ed's vision related to the ed specs, make sure that the ed specs are followed throughout. There should be program consistency across all 3 buildings and all 3 campuses. That doesn't mean that they need to be identical, but there's a consistency. We want to satisfy the current goals and plan flexibility for the future. So in the next 20, 30 years, when you want to renovate these again, that there's still additional opportunities on those campuses. And we want to provide a variety of learning environments and community access. Schools should be community spaces. We have wonderful rooms within them between the gymnasiums and cafeterias and auditoriums and common spaces. We want to be able to make sure that they're open for the community use as well as exterior. And ultimately, we want to incorporate sustainable design solutions throughout, both on the campus and as well as in the buildings. Just as an excerpt from the Darien Public Schools policies, that in all 3 schools, we're basically creating 4 sections for each grade. So that Hindley and Holmes have 24 general classrooms and Royal has 22. Royal, in terms of overall population, is a little bit smaller than the other 2. In each building, we created this document, which we're calling an educational program spreadsheet. This is just a small excerpt. In each building, we listed every single classroom, every single space and office, what the current size was, what the current capacity was, and then what the proposed program to make sure that ultimately we met the ed specs throughout all 3 buildings. This was part of the evaluation process. I won't go through all this, but you can read it in your leisure. But these were the different items, and I guess we didn't have a top 10 list. We only had a top 9 that we did. Going right into the presentation in terms of the schematic design. This is Hindley Elementary School. We have a 3-dimensional model. I think we'll show very short videos, which spins around the exterior of the building, so you have an idea what you're looking at. But in place in the backyard here, we're proposing to have a 1-story addition, which includes special subject spaces, including music, library, learning commons, the world language, as well as the art rooms. You can also see that when we model everything. We model photovoltaics on the roof. We model the mechanical equipment that's also going on the roof, so that when you're looking from the ground, we want to make sure what we see. And we also want to make sure that everybody realizes some of the green and sustainable features that are part of the projects. The general site guidelines For all three campuses, we're to remove the modular classrooms, target 95 parking spaces on each campus, mitigate on and off site stormwater runoff. And at Hindley, also proposing a curb cut that would improve vehicular circulation, increase on-site queuing, and reduce off-site congestion. Just for a general understanding, the area in gray is the existing building and the area in blue is proposed new construction. So in terms of mitigating stormwater runoff on campus, we're proposing to run a new underground storm pipe and have an exposed stormwater detention basin, which will collect water from up to the 100-year flood. It will hold it for a period of time and then slowly release it so that there should be less water leaving the campus than today. We're also proposing a curb cut on Post Road. This would be a new right entrance in and right exit out. And this would allow parents who, some of which currently park on Boston Post Road waiting for their child, to have enough queuing on campus for parents to pull onto the campus and wait for their children there. It's also, we're also creating a pedestrian crossing, both on campus as well as a sidewalk which leads to the crosswalk, which is at the traffic intersection. So we'll have a safer access across the street, across Boston Post Road. Also on campus, we're looking at bus queuing and utilities. So we're extending the bus queuing lane so that more buses can queue on campus. So it eases congestion on Nearwater Lane. We're also doing some work where the dumpster is, as well as a new electric service. Finally, there's outdoor student activity areas on all campuses, and Hindley is no exception. We're providing a new outdoor lunch seating area because the bus loop alters the existing one. We're proposing to demolish the existing library, which is in front of the original Hindley entrance, and create a new plaza there. We're creating an outdoor classroom that is wrapped around by the existing building and the proposed new addition. And there's also some new asphalt playground in the backyard. Here's a quick view of the original front entrance once the library is removed and the plaza that could be created. And this is the courtyard design proposed within the new courtyard. And just to go through the guidelines here, again, we're looking even on outside spaces, inspirational places for learning. We want to incorporate the ed specs, consistency across the three buildings, satisfy current goals and flexibility, provide for a variety of learning environments, in this case, an outdoor one, incorporate sustainable design, utilize this area for both play and teaching, create a sense of scale, and provide shading. The plans, these are the floor plans, and we won't go into any detail other than, again, for people to understand the color coordination here. In gray is existing, gray and purple are existing building footprint. In gray is areas that we are going to be modifying mechanical and electrical systems and upgrading there. In purple are spaces where we're modifying rooms. We might be taking down walls. We're definitely doing ceilings and lighting and flooring and some other finishes and spaces. And then blue is the new construction. On the first floor, we will house the kindergarten house as well as the first and second grade house. And the new addition, as mentioned before, is where the special subjects. So everybody who goes to Hindley will take advantage of the new construction and the special subject spaces that are part of it. The second floor, similar today, will house the third, fourth, and fifth grade houses and be a destination for them. In each case, not only are we looking at the general classrooms and right-sizing the general classrooms, but we're also providing resource spaces that are adjacent to each of the grade houses. And you'll see that throughout all the plans. Here's some renderings of the Hindley School. And I think at this point, we can probably show that video. And I think it's about a 15-second video, if you would. Maybe it's a little longer than that. But here we're looking at the west side from Nearwater Lane, spinning around to the bus entrance. You can see on the roof there, you can see photovoltaic panels as well as rooftop units.
Air conditioning.
So this is the area where the existing library is. That library is stated would plan to be removed, and then that original entrance would be restored and be able to use at the beginning and the end of the day by students who are going out to the bus or coming in from the bus. Otherwise, the main entrance as it currently is today, which is what you're looking at the end elevation there, is planned to remain. It's the appropriate place for the main entrance with all the parking in the parking lot immediately adjacent to it. And that will be the entrance for all visitors. Now we're looking at the proposed one-story addition with a library in the foreground, followed by the world language, art, and music classrooms. And we're looking from a new playground, new asphalt playground that's there. So that's Hindley. We can go back to the presentation.
Sure. You guys want to ask any questions about Hindley? Sure, Mr. Sini.
Just a quick question, going back to my old roots. Have you guys talked to the state about the curb cuts and the crosswalk? Just a shiver at the length of time. Sometimes it gets the state to move on.
We're in the process of that. Mr. Canis, do you want to come up and say anything about that since
Just like
you showed up this evening? Here's your big opportunity.
Okay, great. For the record, Joseph Canis, a licensed professional engineer with Ty and Bond, civil engineers for the project. We have initiated the coordination process with DOT. They did request some additional information, some more details on the island, but it looks like it's moving in a favorable direction.
I think.
Any other questions on Hindley? Yes, Mrs. Ackman.
General question, is the 95 parking spaces part of our ed specs? I just can't remember from all the ed specs that we read. Or is that a building committee decision?
It's really in the master plan. It's not so much in the specs. So we looked at the sites and we decided to go ahead and look at parking because we were doing enough additions.
Okay,
I
I'm
think
just
this-
making sure that that's not an ed spec issue that, to Mr. Janeen's point earlier, if people really want to talk
Yeah.
about parking, that's not an ed spec issue we have control over.
Right.
That's a decision of the building committee.
Yep.
Not placing a value on that decision, just trying to
So-
help people.
It's a good point. Yep.
Thank you.
Just a general question on I guess it's for all schools, is do any of the schools have stormwater drain runoff currently, or is these all new additions to the schools? The three schools, so not including Oxrich and Tokenie.
They all have stormwater management in different facets. And so Hindley, which we just saw, actually has an underground drain pipe which exits the property south and goes under several of the neighbors' properties before it comes up to surface. And so the Hindley project, for example, is containing that water on campus, letting it, for the most part, soak into the ground, and anything that's left over the course of a day would then exit the pipe system. So we should be reducing and improving that. But yes, it's a code requirement to address all new impervious surface. So we're addressing the new impervious surface as well as any existing conditions that are problematic.
Thank you.
John.
Just a general question. Is there a way that we can see the previous schematics for the floor plans of the buildings before the proposed changes in purple? Is that available somewhere?
The as-bills?
Well, we do have floor plans, so there's no reason why we couldn't share what the existing buildings look like in terms of floor plans if you want to compare the existing to proposed.
That would be great.
Sure.
For my,
Yep. Thank you. Let's keep going.
Okay, so this is Holmes Elementary School. The guidelines are generally the same. The biggest difference on this property has to do, and we've been referring to it as the Curtis property. So excuse me, we use Curtis as opposed to 32 Hoyt. Curtis property will meet additional parking needs of 15 plus or minus spaces. If the school decides to do that. We'll provide service and emergency access to the rear and safe construction access. There's a road as part of this. And we'll address stormwater detention needs on campus because of the new additions. We need to provide stormwater detention, similar to that last question, and maintain existing tree growth. So here, this is the north parking lot improvements proposed.
Eric, on the last slide, I think it's important to clarify that what we're doing on the Curtis property is locating the entire stormwater management system on the Curtis property. That allows us to not put it elsewhere on the campus, right? We can just use the Hoyt Street, correct?
That's correct. That these additions require stormwater management, and that the town property is downhill from the school property. And so all that water tends to go down into that basin to begin with. And so we're proposing to provide a basin in that area to collect that stormwater before it goes anywhere else.
Thank you.
The two improved areas in the front of the property is an additional parking proposed at the back end of the parking lot, as well as improvements to the front entry area. In terms of the Curtis property, there's several proposed additions and recommendations here. One is the dumpster location. We're proposing to leave it generally in the current dumpster location that it is today. What's important about the next aspect is that we create this service drive that leads back to it so that the garbage trucks today, which go across the playground, wouldn't have to go that route. This also provides emergency access to the back of the property there. And the third reason is during construction, to put these two or three additions to this building, it's far preferable to do it from the backside as opposed to one of the original plans or concepts, which was to have construction vehicles go directly across the playground. And so this is keeping construction vehicles and students apart from each other. This plan also proposed, as mentioned before, stormwater basins here, as well as an additional parking lot. Similar to Hindley, there's an outdoor classroom, which we'll go over in a little bit greater detail in a second. So here's, again, an outdoor classroom. This has multiple purposes. We can use it for play as well as for educational. What you're seeing on the right there is an expansion of the Learning Commons library, and reaching out directly out from that is where that learning garden is, or outdoor classroom. Today, that's all asphalt. So the proposal here is to green up that interior space and create a nice courtyard. You can see some of the features on the left there, which could include a platform so that you could have small events or performances. It also doubles as a seat, as you can see the 4 kids sitting on it. Again, in gray is mechanical and electrical work, in purple is major renovation, and in blue are new construction. So at Holmes, there's 3 areas of new construction. In the middle, and there's a large purple box there. That's the existing library. Learning Commons is planned to be expanded into the courtyard, as you saw in that last slide. At the top of the page is a 2-story classroom addition. On the first floor is for 1st and 2nd graders, and on the 2nd floor is for 4th and 5th graders. As mentioned earlier in the presentation, there's 4 classrooms, general classrooms per grade, plus resource space. By putting this addition on, we're able to achieve that so that the 1st and 2nd grade house is a dedicated hallway house for those students, and the same thing for the 4th and 5th graders. 3rd graders already have a dedicated area, as do the kindergartners. Also in blue there, in the middle of the page is a music wing. The cafeteria, it has the stage, cafeteria commons, and the ideal place for the music classrooms would be adjacent to that stage. And so that's what we're proposing here, as well as a quarter that's in front of the cafeteria that leads to the main entrance, We're also proposing a secure vestibule at that main entrance. The other two schools already have vestibules. Holmes today has a vestibule within the lobby. Here's some renderings. And again, once again, if you could show the video. That's the Holmes video. So here you're looking from Hoyt at the original building, parking lot. This is the proposed addition for the music classrooms on the right and the corridor in the center with a new entrance vestibule on the left there. The entrance on the right, as you can see right there, would be access back to the kitchen and the serving area. This is this roadway that we're saying is important for service access, construction, as well as emergency vehicles. Straight ahead is the classroom addition. It's the backside of the classroom addition. Facing the field are the two main classrooms for first grade and second grade on the first floor and fourth and fifth on the second floor. Those are those bay windows that you can see that bump out. And now you can see into that courtyard with a library learning commons straight ahead and the outdoor classroom with the blue textured pavement. Great.
Before we leave Holmes, I should clarify the earlier question. The number 95 comes from the master plan, but the specs for Hanley just say look at overall traffic plans. On Holmes, it's more specific. It does ask us to study the development of the Curtis property into an additional parking area. So just so we have clarification of what's in the specs.
Any other questions on Holmes?
I just want, sorry. In terms of the Curtis property, we heard a few people talk about the safety of the parking. Can you just talk to, how you envision that space being used and will be used by faculty and staff and not parents? Like, how do you envision the safety of those new spaces?
Good question. I would expect that probably would be faculty or staff parking in that area, but obviously it would be overflow when you have events. All three campuses are 8 acres. They're all relatively tight. And so finding parking, available parking on this campus, there were 2 locations that we notified as potential places to add. I think that Holmes has something in the range of 70 parking spaces now, and so adding approximately 15 parking places on campus.
The other concerns that were raised were light pollution, noise pollution, and drainage. We have talked about some of those things, correct?
So there's some existing trees on campus that are in that area that are beautiful that we're planning to maintain. So we're working around some of the existing trees. There probably would be one street light that would be a cutoff fixture that would just illuminate that area of the parking if there was a parking lot there. It would be LED lights. So, and the way that the lighting is today with dark skies, it really can be contained. And that would be only the light level necessary for people who are going from the building to their parking space in the evening time when there's a night meeting.
Thank you.
So this is a view of Royal from the air. Similar to the other projects, we're removing the modular classrooms, we're targeting 95 parking spaces, and we're mitigating stormwater. On this campus, there's also 3 additions. There's a classroom addition, there's an art and music addition, as well as expansion of the library. So parking and utility improvements, we've notated 2 locations on campus where we could potentially add additional parking spaces. One is right at the corner of the intersection at the bottom left of the page. And the other is an extension of the existing parking, a large parking lot. We're also looking to relocate the dumpster and to screen it. Currently, that dumpster is right off of the drop-off area. The generator is also planned to be relocated as part of this project. We're doing a new electric service in the back. And to address stormwater, there's a subsurface stormwater detention between the classroom addition and the existing playing field. At times that playing field at the edge there is damp. That is actually exactly where the stormwater detention is planned to address some of those issues. Outdoor activity improvements includes a large outdoor classroom. That outdoor classroom is planned exactly on the footprint of where the existing library is. When the 1990s edition was installed, the 1990s edition and library were only a few feet apart. And general practice is to try to keep at least 30 feet apart when you're looking out a window in a classroom building. And so here we're proposing to demolish that and create a courtyard in its place. There's also a large amount of asphalt in the rear of the property, which is underutilized. We're proposing to restore that back to grass. Here's a couple of views of that courtyard. Similar to Holmes, the library is in the center, in the back there. You have a platform and performing space. In this courtyard, there's actually more open green space. On the right of the picture, you can see 3 window boxes, and those are, it's a 2-story classroom addition. First graders on the first floor and second graders on the second floor. And each of those boxes denote 1 classroom. As mentioned, there's 3 additions. The third addition is the art and music wing, which is directly on top of the footprint of the existing first floor classroom wing. First grade classroom wing, excuse me. Here's some renderings of that. And if you can show the video of the Royal School, please. You can see, again, on the roof, the photovoltaic panels, some rooftop equipment. We're going down, we're looking on the right of the new addition, which creates the third side of the courtyard. The library is straight ahead. Now on the multi-purpose rugby field, looking at the first and second grade house and a stair at the end of the hallway. On the right side of the screen there are the art and music classrooms. And there's a garden space there. That's where the existing garden is today. And you can see that there's a lot more green space between here and where the building is. And that's where currently there's a lot of asphalt, which we're planning to remove and restore to grass. And now you're looking at the art classroom at the end. You can see that the art classrooms and music classrooms in all 3 as well have roofs that pitch up a little bit. That's to provide some additional height. Art and music spaces like to have volume like this room. And the art rooms also like to have northern light if possible. And so we were looking at building orientation and also volume for those spaces. And that's why most of them are on the first floor.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Questions on Royal?
You just mentioned, Eric, just about the rugby field.
So the rugby field today is a modified size. One of the end zones has a bite out of it because of the way that the existing sidewalk system works and where the existing building is. With the new addition, that rugby field would become even narrower, and one of the proposals is actually to relocate the rugby field this next summer to the Middlesex Middle School. They like to play on grass. There's grass there, and that was one of the thoughts as part of the committee discussions. Was that correctly stated?
Yeah, it certainly is. Thank you.
So I know
Now
one.
I have a question. I had no questions, Alan, and then you asked a question. So, but when we're talking about moving a field, that is back in, or who's playing it, that's back in the control of the Board of Ed. So that's where I'm.
Well, that's why
confused
I'm
you're asking.
bringing it up. There's a potential of having to move that over to to the middle school. So that's,
Moving the team, not the-
oh yeah, the team, but
Okay.
because of the field moves, the team, but yes, yeah.
So less a construction issue, more a scheduling issue.
I know just from, and Luke, go back, you know, as this goes through the process of planning and zoning and the EPC and all those good things, the end of the day at Oxrich, it was greatly improved in terms of the overall drainage and water retention. It's an underground city that's actually there. And, you know, all these schools, there's neighbors, number one, there's wetlands and, you know, there's some open land and forest land. So that's a key ingredient as the building committee goes through the process, working with all the town agencies and looking at all that has to be done. And I know in working with Luke, we spent a lot of time. It's a good question Mrs. Achman brought up, but based on feedback you get from open houses and just queuing in general, we spent a lot of time maximizing the amount of parking we could get out of Oxrich without it looking like a big parking lot. And I think that's kind of a charge of the committee to continue to do. And it makes sense. So thank you. Any other questions for Eric, Travis, Joe? Yeah, Tara.
Really just personally selfish. Did you have to touch the playgrounds at all?
Say that again. Tara?
The playground. Is it the playground that's there at Royal? Is it still in existence or?
Yes, the existing playground that's on the far side. Yes. And it's both asphalt as well as play surface. That's still there. But currently the area that we're talking about changing into grass, because it's very difficult to monitor two different sides of the building at the same time for recess. So everybody used the one area, and this is an area that's really underutilized as an asphalt play area. So one of the other discussions this evening has to do with roof replacement, and just sort of briefly, so tee that up. Your existing low pitch, you know, most people refer to them as flat. They're not exactly flat. They're low pitched. They drain. They slope to drains. But the Hindley Holmes and Royal roofs were last replaced in 2006. If they're not replaced as part of this project or at the similar time of this project, they'll be 18 or 19 years old at the end of this. And we believe that the roof warranties that you have are 20 years. The mechanical systems and photovoltaic panels that are planned for these roofs are 25+ year life pieces of equipment. So you don't really want to put equipment like that on an old roof. You want to fix the roof up and then you put the equipment on it. There are two exceptions. Within the last couple of years, you've done some partial roof replacements at Hindley and Holmes. And just want to note that those roofs that were done would not be replaced. Those are in great shape and the new equipment can go right on top of them. So our recommendation is to do a roofing project in conjunction with the project that you saw this evening.
Arlen, you want to back us up and give some of the more of the context for that?
Yeah, if the board may recall that we were discussing with Greenbank the installation of solar on those roofs, but given this development and change in design, the change in location of HVAC units and so on, that really doesn't make sense now to continue with that project. And given the age of the roof as well, that to build it, to do the construction, and then a couple of years later have to tear the roof down again and or take the solars off the roofs and redo them. So it's really at this point the recommendation to move forward with incorporating the full roof design and installation in this particular project, and to defer the Greenbank installation of the solar panels until then. So they will work with us and delaying that installation, but it doesn't seem right now to make sense not to do that, which would mean additional funds for the actual project itself would have to be requested.
So go ahead, Ms. Zuckman.
I think I'm going to ask what Mrs. McCann's going to explain, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So are we doing this project simultaneously? Are we expanding the scope of the building committee and therefore understanding that they may need to ask for additional funds? Like what, or are we doing this like in conjunction and the board needs to be looking for additional funds?
So, right. So no, what has been recommended by Eric, by Dave Cravenzola, who's on the phone, by Kevin and Alan, and the building committee is happy to do it, is to take this under our scope, because the timeline would have had us originally doing this summer. Now we're ending up running into a timeline that's contemporaneous, plus with the location of our systems up on the roof. We're now pushing out into locations where we were originally planning to put photovoltaics. So it requires now that the projects work together in conjunction. And so we have, as the Board of Ed, already asked for a portion of the funding. But now what we're recommending is that the building committee take over those portions of the roof projects. And then we would need to go forward and get the remainder of the funding from the town to complete the 3 projects.
So that seems to be the most efficient and makes sense. I would agree with that plan. There are some logistics and
Correct.
somersaults to do there. So
Correct.
we should just make sure we have those I's dotted and T's crossed to get it done.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, the quick work that the building committee did and kind of the challenge we had and the stall we had in working with the state on some of our roof replacement projects will prove, I think, more efficient and more effective for us to kind of consolidate these into these existing renovations. And then to your point, Mrs. Ackman, we'll work with our capital project spreadsheet and looking at those dollars and where those dollars are and working with or the building committee will work with the town on incorporating and looking at those dollars that are in our future capital project. And, you know, Dr. Adley and I have spoken to and had Green Bank on the phone. And while we want to continue to look at solar for all these buildings and become as efficient as possible, they're willing to work with us on a go-forward basis. It turns out they also have some challenges with supply chain issues with the Green Bank and with equipment and solar equipment. So it's kind of all playing out to our favor, which I think is good. Yeah.
Okay.
Eric, thank you. Eric, Travis, thank you. Okay.
I wish I was done, but I'm not quite done yet. So you have to listen to me for a few more minutes. I'm not a mechanical or electrical engineer. I just play one on TV. And nor is Jill or Chris Price, but they seem to be playing one recently as well. Just sort of high level in terms of the systems, we're really trying as a district to reduce the dependency on fossil fuels as part of this project. And so we're looking at systems that are electrical based as opposed to fossil fuel based. We are proposing to maintain some of the existing systems because they're in good working order. And so as part of this project, we're proposing a dual source type of heating system so that we could use either electric or fossil fuels depending on the need. All the projects address ventilation. So we're going to be improving the ventilation in all 3 buildings. They all address air conditioning in the 3 schools. So that's kind of a high level mechanical. Electrical, you have done over time replace some of the existing light fixtures with LED light fixtures. We're proposing to replace the balance. So all 3 of those buildings will be completely LED, including the exterior light fixtures. And we're addressing other systems and electrical services throughout the building. There's actually new electric service at all 3 buildings because of the additional power required for the air conditioning. So here's one of the fun slides, cost estimates. So and I know that Dave is on the phone as well, so he may want to jump in at some point, but I'll tee this up. So we've had 2 independent cost estimators look at our schematic design. One is the ONG AP construction team, and the other is NASCO Construction, who is our independent cost estimator. They looked at it in separate rooms for a few weeks. They came back, we reconciled, we reviewed the numbers collectively, we reconciled. Their numbers are a little bit apart, but they're very close. And ultimately, when you add all 3 buildings together, the base bid work that we're proposed to put in front of you this evening is on budget. So Hindley and Holmes are a little bit, Hindley and Royal are a little bit under budget, and Holmes is a little bit over budget. But when you combine the 3, we've met the budget. There's a couple other discussion points. The Curtis property at Holmes, the work that was proposed as part of that is approximately an $800,000 project. And the roof work is approximately a $3.6 million project for the replacement of roofs on all three schools. There's some other alternative work associated with hardscape restoration. The project doesn't address repaving parking lots or sidewalk repair or replacement. So O&G recommended that we at least carry a number there. And if we find that we're on or under budget at any point, or we have contingency money left over, that would be probably a good place to use the additional funds. With that, I guess I'll turn it over to David.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, Dave Cravanzolo, representing the O&G AP joint venture. I really don't have a whole lot to add. I think Eric had summed it up. Just to reiterate the position that we're in right now. On the screen you have here is a comparison of estimates. So we have 3 schools, and as Eric mentioned, they had NASCO conducting an estimate for them, independent, while we were doing an estimate of the schematic design documents. And not only were our estimates relatively close to one another, but as Eric had mentioned, we're within just 1 or 2% of, we're actually slightly under budget by, I think about 2.5%, something like that. So on projects of this magnitude, in this climate at this point, that's a great spot to be in. So I know that our team and KG&D's team priced the same set of documents, and we have a good stepping point for going forward. So I think that, as Eric mentioned, there's a couple of things that we're looking to maintain as alternates throughout the project, and we'll be working with the building committee on honing in those alternates for scopes of work that would be nice to have, and that we would have the ability to make a decision on those scopes of work when the bids come in, if the bids do come in favorably and we have more funds to spend on added work.
Any questions?
Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome.
Mr. Brown.
Just real quickly on the previous slide, the 3.6 million for the additional roof work, is that gross or is that netted against what we'd have to do anyway as we get to the end of the useful life?
That's gross.
That's gross.
Gross.
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
So we haven't netted it back yet. Thank you.
We'll we have to work with what's in our projections and the Board of Finance. Good question. Thank you.
So then this is the last slide. I'm not going to go through every approval that we're going to be doing, but there's a lot of work that's been done. There's a lot of work still to be done. We're coming up with a meeting with the Architectural Review Board later this month. We're meeting with Planning and Zoning as well next month. And we've been in discussions with the state. And so there'll be plenty of discussions and meetings over the course of the next 2 months as this project gets deeper into the design and development. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we can say enough thank you to KG&D and APO&G and Ty and Bond for being partners. But if you look at what's just been presented and you look at kind of the calendar of events and what's occurred in the meeting space, I mean, this is true like passion in terms of the volunteers. I see Dave Martin here, Chris Price is here, our principals are here, Jill's sitting next to me, but this is the power of how this town gets stuff done from a volunteerism standpoint. And having done it with Oxrich, the hours and the days are incredible. So I know everyone appreciates it, but I don't think it can be said enough. The time and energy that gets put into building a building or renovating 3 buildings is huge. Over and above that, the time that the superintendent and the administrative staff and Rich Rudel put into it also. So thank you to all of that. Good. So any other questions around the schematic design? So we'll do these one at a time.
Couple
Yep,
of
sure,
comments.
sure.
Two things to note, that the 1018 Board of Selectmen, 1018 Board of Finance, they have very kindly scheduled their meetings in the same day. So the building committee is hoping to go with the Board of Ed to ask that the Board of Ed would, if we decide to do that, would ask for Curtis, and then the building committee would follow and ask for scope, and then we should have dollars defined by then. So that is what those two dates mean in terms of discussion we're having tonight. The other piece is that while we are approving the schematic design, we've showed you the whole thing. We are doing an additional look at some additional due diligence on the air conditioning system. There were some questions that came up. We're going to try to keep the project on schedule. So we're going to ask you to approve the schematic design tonight, but to understand that we may be back to you with the HVAC again, ideally in 2 weeks' time. Okay, we won't do a huge presentation, but we'll highlight any differences. Just trying to keep the project on schedule. So tonight you're approving everything else. If you want
Questions,
to.
thoughts? Good. Well, then may I have a motion to approve the schematic design for Henley, Holmes, and Royal Elementary Schools as presented by KG&D Architects? Mr. Sini, second by Mrs. Best. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. That's exciting to keep this moving forward, and someone has to organize the parade when the portables get thrown out of town, right? Also, before I go to a motion, any other questions or conversation that we want to have around the Curtis property? I mean, I've been on this board long enough. I think a few other folks have been to know the house that was there. I think the town made a very smart purchase in acquiring that piece of property, as access to that house was through the school parking lot. There were a lot of questions around the use of the house once the town bought it. The Board of Ed went through a process at the time, saw no use or need for the house. A decision was then made to demolish the house and kind of just level the land there. Although I don't think last time I was there, it's not all that level, as you can see by the work that has to be done. And then at the time, the board had, the district came through the board, saw no need for use of that property. So that property has sat vacant, to this point. So I like the fact that it's being incorporated. I know from a security standpoint and from a fire standpoint, from Oxrich, that property helps with a circular drive that needs to be put around these schools for access to emergency equipment. So any other questions or thoughts around the Curtis property? Mrs. Ockman.
I just have a question of the timing of the timing of this now, given that the building committee will remain in control of the project. Would we not request care, custody, and control once the project is done and we're taking the project back from the town rather than now? Or, and you probably did this research, why would we take it now and then give control back to the building committee, which is a town committee for design? I don't really care as long as we do it the right way. The answer is the building committee is going to design it how they need it and use it how they need for this project. I just want to make sure we do it the right way.
I think the building committee wanted to be sure that the board was interested in having it. And so the concern was, it would be silly, but the concern was if the board didn't actually ask for care, custody, and control, and then something went wrong.
The board has wanted control of it for years. So if this is the right way to do it, I think that's fine. We wanted control of it in order to best utilize it for the school. So
I think in talking to Jill and Chris and Dr. Adley, I think this seems to make sense to me, to just get control of it so that they can put that kind of off to the side as you continue with the design and what the concept would be on that property. But good question. Mr. Sini.
Just the process, I mean, is it just a transfer of almost deed from the town to the school? Or with these approvals, you mentioned Board of Education, Board of Select, Board of Select, Board of Finance and Arts.
So, okay. We have to, there are more I's and T's we have to figure out. The first step is to go to the Board of Selectmen, but I have not done a transfer of care, custody, and control before. So we need to get back to you guys with what exactly will occur from that point.
So that the town just needs to deem it
Yes.
school property such that we have care, custody, and control. And that's why I was asking when, since the decisions are still town decisions to be made on that property. Again, I don't care which way it goes, because I think we're gonna seed it right back to the building committee. I just want to make sure we do it the proper way, so we don't end up in a straight quagmire.
I guess I would go for, I mean, there's also, if it's a separate parcel, probably have to merge the lots. I mean, so that's where it's going with some of the details. We might even have to go to the P&Z department at the very least. There was a comment about, you know, being zoned residential, but schools are zoned as of right within a residential communities, just
Right.
that, don't want to get too in the weeds, but just.
So I think to those questions, it makes sense to authorize to give authorization to make the request to the Board of Selectmen to go through the process. And then I think at the next meeting, we'll hear about, to your point, is it a separate lot? Is there anything else that has to be done in terms of transfer of ownership or deeds?
So John brings up a really good point. We might need to take it now, because
Yeah.
then it loses its residential zoning and becomes as of right.
Yeah.
So we might
No,
actually need it earlier in order to get it.
Sorry, let me be clear. At least, I don't want to get into zoning too much. Schools sit in a residential zone and they operate as of right within a residential zone.
Yeah.
But there is a separate overlay. Well, yeah, that piece of property might have to go to the municipal use zone also. So there's some zoning questions.
We might need it first in order.
To go, if we wanted to go through the process, yeah.
So we're good on the schematic designs. So we'll move, may I have a motion to request that the Board of Selectmen convey acquisition, custody, and control of 32 White Street, currently known as the Curtis property, to the Board of Education. Mrs. Ockman, second by Mr. Brown. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you to the building committee. Thank you to our partners here, and thank you, Jill. Anything else you wanted to add?
No, thank you.
Very
This
good.
is
This project continues
really
to move
exciting.
forward at a fast clip, so thank you very much, everyone,
Thank you, gentlemen.
participating. Good. All right, we will move on to further discussion and possible action on school security proposal and supplemental appropriation requests. Dr. Adler. Thank you, principals, for hanging out after I know a long day. So good to see you here, but thank you.
So what the board has as part of their packet is basically a brief memorandum that talks about request and appropriation. This memorandum suggests that we ask for the full of appropriation. That's certainly a board decision as to how it would want to handle that. If it's so deems appropriate to move forward with this request and to support this request, as we have projected that obtaining the SSOs and having them in place will not happen until early January in terms of what needs to take place at the earliest here. So the figures that are here, just the 500,000 suggests if it was a full year, so that's just to get the full number on the table. It was our recommendation that we would ask that a full appropriation and return it, but the board can certainly discuss what its pleasure is in doing that. But I think the board has been fully apprised, and we've heard the public in terms of their concerns, their support, questions that they had, and so on and so forth. And I'm happy to answer continued questions, but this just outlines the process and the two motions to move forward with the project.
Thank you, Dr. Riley. I'll open it up. I guess let's continue. Any further questions or conversations around the SSOs and what's been presented around the Director of Security, the roles and responsibilities, and anything further that we want to discuss or take up on that? Mrs. Perrin.
Thank you. During our last board meeting, there was some questions brought up about what training and qualifications the SSOs would go through to work with and in contact with children, and particularly children with needs. And I'd just like a little more clarity as is there a particular training they would go through? What are some of the ideas that people are thinking about with that? And just a little more specificity on that would be helpful.
So I do have some just to mention here, if the question came up. They would be both specific to what all our staff would go through and some unique ones. Certainly things like verbal training, physical, psychological management training, that's the PMT. The standard bloodborne pathogens, mandated reporting training, ruler, responsive classroom, preventative bullying, sexual harassment training, emergency response training, and sensitivity training to identify students with working closely with school psychologists. Those are, it's not an extensive list, but those are some of the trainings that the SSOs would go through.
Thank you, Mrs. Parent. Mrs. Worm.
Yes, could we just talk about the reporting structure again with the director of security, about the decision to have him report to basically to Rich, opposed to directly to Dr. Adley?
You took him to the director of security? Yes. That typically facilities, groundskeeping and so on ultimately falls under Rich's department, as does things like transportation. Ultimately, everybody's under my supervision. So don't think I would be out of the picture. That wouldn't be the case at all.
No, I was just wondering why it wasn't a direct report. Really, it's a question I've been getting.
Other than the assistant superintendents and the cabinet themselves, they're the ones who are in direct support to me. But other than that, anybody below that would be direct report, line of report to one of our cabinet members and then to me. I think there's not one completely right answer, and certainly a reasonable question.
We also have, I should note that Chief Anderson again has given his generous time to be with us this evening, so he is also here. Mrs. Best.
Following on Ms. Worm's question, could you speak a little more to the role of the Director of Security and any anticipated interaction with kids? I know we've said that this is not someone who needs to be a former police officer, but I feel like we haven't spent a lot of time discussing his role, her role, their role, and how the group will interact, the campus monitors and the SSOs reporting into the Director of Security. I would love to hear a little more on that.
Sure. He or she will work in close conjunction also with the Darien Police Department and any other security agencies. The role of the security monitor would said for supervision purposes would also supervise our
campus monitors.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Our campus monitors that we have, and typical sort of responsibilities would include patrol and monitoring of the property, looking at keeping us apprised on our emergency response plan, being proactive about that, provide security for sponsored non-school sort of sponsored activities on school grounds, assist with students, would have limited capacity, and it's not really a student sort of position per se. So they're going to have limited interactions with students. I can't think of any particularly that they would have, but that would not be the role of this particular person. So they would have supervisory roles and then the proactive roles, and also working with the police department and really being proactive in it and making sure that we are adhering to. We just got the audit, right? And I won't speak to the audit, the contents of the audit, but you can see it. But certainly implementing some of the things in the audit and making sure we're on top of those, both cultural, practical, policy, practice issues. So that's the typical.
I think, Mrs. Best, one question that I've gotten from a few folks too, and I think it's important because it was part of the early conversations. And I think as the process went through, looking at the role and the responsibilities and the kind of the look and feel of these elementary schools, which are true neighborhood elementary schools, that the campus monitor role exists, stays as it is still that greeter, that warm person that everyone knows, that mom or whatever the person is that's there. So I think that's key. I almost see, and I had this conversation with Dr. Adley and someone else that brought it up. I almost see the SSO as being there but not being there in terms of an invisible force that kind of knows, depending on the day and the time, and whether it's a beautiful day and kids are outside or it's a rainy day and everyone's inside, they'll know where to be in that school in terms of keeping an eye on what's going on. And if there's extracurricular activities or like the Hinley happening or the Tokenie Pumpkin Fair too, I think it's an added resource. And then And I don't know if you want to add on this, Dr. Adley, but, we've had several questions about their interactions with, if there's challenges in the hallways or, children become disruptive, what's their role? My understanding is nothing really changes in terms of the normal protocols of how that's handled in the school. They are there as an additional resource if needed, but, the teachers, the aides, the monitors and the administrative staff continue to do what they've normally done around situations like that.
So if there's a classroom and there's a disruption there, and sometimes if you had to move some children or something from a classroom, or the administration is going to be called for that. This isn't a first responder to those particular incidents. That's why we have 2 assistant principals in the school. That's why we have senior staff members in the school, well-trained clinicians in the school, and they will be the people that be used. But at the same time, if you saw something that was going to cause a situation of some kids were going to hurt themselves, I don't expect any member of the school community to just stand by and watch that happen. That's not going to be the case either. So the person, certainly the SSOs, will have interaction with teachers and will have interaction with children, but the first response in general will be our administration the way it is today, or those clinicians or team leaders or otherwise, whatever structures we have in place today would be that's the way we're going to handle it moving forward.
Thank you. Do you have a question, Mrs. Duncan?
I had a couple. Oh, sorry. Some of them are now forming and changing. Maybe just the 2 first quick ones that I have is, one, I think you said the director of security would have responsibilities supervising non-school events after hours. Is that baked into their salary or is that overtime? And then my second question would be, is if part of the director of security's role is informed by the Kerma report. I think at one point we thought we were going to see the initial findings of that report. Will we see that? I know we're talking about voting on this tonight, but if part of his job is what's found in that report, but we don't know what's in that report, I feel like I have a little bit of a backwards system.
Yeah, it was always going to be tight, but we did get it relatively on time from them, and I remember we were scheduled to go through this in March 2020. So we would continue with this particular process. We would continue with the hiring process. I hope and anticipate we can get to the board, and if we have to do it, the 20th would wind us up with our administration. So that should complete, I think that's a Thursday. By the following Monday, any changes to that report and the changes for the report would only be for accuracies and inaccuracies to make sure that, and because there are some in there, so I'll make sure that those are corrected, because it wouldn't make as much sense if it's not accurate as to practices or how things are referenced in the district. So we could probably, I still think we'll be able to get to the board before the hiring process of the person. I still think that's possible.
I guess my only follow-up on that would be, if what we're doing is hiring someone for a particular job, but there might be things we're not aware of what their job might be, does it make any sense to delay at a meeting and just find out the information so we know the job we're approving? So when we go to the Board of Finance or the RTM, we can really be very articulate and feel sure as a group we knew what we approved.
I think you would, perhaps one way of describing it is this person, the director of security, one of his charges or her charges would be to actually, anytime we do an audit, would be to review the audit with the administration, with the central services, with the board, and follow up on those recommendations that we have to put in place. So it's not a matter of, that in itself would be part of the job description, in the sense that to follow up and make sure that we are completing any of the recommendations, the ones that we agreed that we want to have to actually implement. So that person that's part of their job. I don't think you're going to be missing anything from the actual report per se, that his or her job will be to actually follow through with the recommendations in the report.
Have you also spoke to Kerma about kind of where we were going with this in terms of director of security and kind of what we were looking
Yes,
at
I've
with
reported,
SSOs?
yes, I've reported a number of times on that, yes.
Mrs. McCann.
Have you and your team looked at the report and just verified whether or not you anticipate any changes coming from it? I mean, I hear your point that would be part of it.
I anticipate our team has received it, so everybody, our administration have just recently received it, so we've had a discussion today about it.
Yeah.
Our next meeting will be, well, we'll have a meeting before the 20th, before Karma come back to our administration. I anticipate, as I shared with the board prior to this, that there will be practices, cultural things that we will have to address. I would anticipate there will be some infrastructure discussions that we would either do or not do. And I don't want to really talk many more details about it, but I think the idea that there's going to be infrastructure and there's going to be cultural or practice recommendations in there.
Mrs. Dust.
Thank you. Is it possible that there might be infrastructure ideas that we would want to consider that might change what's on the table right now that would be included as part of this appropriation?
I would say that they were consistent. They are consistent with this appropriation. If we were to do anything else, that would come through the actual, right? I would imagine it would come through the actual budget process. But currently, I think that they're consistent with the infrastructure requests that are before us at the moment.
Mrs. Ackman.
So I saw some of the email exchanges and thank you to the public. You know, we have heard for and against, we have heard people wanting more information. I guess one of the concerns or things I'd like the board to think about here is, given that we are hearing people who are very for this and people who are against it, to be fair, we usually hold public hearings on matters like this. We did originally with an SRO. We do on things like lights. We did with open choice. And this is such a cultural change that I've just been surprised sometimes when I'm talking to the community, people are like, well, what are you talking about? We haven't heard about it. So would it not serve us well in our kind of like, we want to make sure we're communicating and discussing to offer that opinion. So we really do say we've provided 2 meetings, we've provided a public hearing, we are making a decision now, but we have given plenty of opportunity for the public to be heard. I just feel like we've done it on issues that are less of a cultural shift. I'm just surprised we haven't done it here.
Mr. Sini.
We're talking about security here, so there's details that I'd rather not discuss in public that we discussed in executive session in great detail.
Well, I'm talking about the public piece that we're going for a public appropriation on, just a hearing on that, just so everyone has had an opportunity to weigh in on it. I mean, it's a significant, we're looking at hundreds of $1,000s off budget cycle. I do recognize it as security. I don't think any of the private things we've held in executive session need to be discussed. It just seems like we may be missing a piece, opening ourselves up to the criticism later.
Any other public comment? Any other public comment?
The
Any
only
other board comment?
The only caveat I would make there, Tara, is that I appreciate there's a large cultural shift, and that is often when we would have a public hearing. The only difference here, I think, is that we are, we implemented the SRO. It was a little bit of a different model, right, which we've talked about. That when we implemented, when we talked about open choice, it's not a security decision. So I think because it's a security decision, when we have a public hearing, it's typically because we want to hear from the public, and we are using that broad base of information to help inform our own decisions. I think this is an instance where we are looking at a security recommendation from the chief of police, and it's a little bit different than hearing a recommendation that is different I think it's just different in nature.
So I
hear
agree
your point.
with the thing that our chief of police and his opinion holds a different weight that we need to consider when we make our decision. And I'd be open with the public. Chief Anderson's decision holds a significant amount of weight with me. That said, I think that we keep talking about, let's have a public discussion on issues, or let's have a public hearing on issues. This seems to be a large off-cycle budget appropriation with a significant cultural change. It seemed to me that some of the dialogue over email was, I've heard from X number of people that they're in favor of this. I'm just putting it out there. If the board decides it does not want a public hearing on it, I just want to be able to say, the choice was out there to have a public hearing on it. We could get 1,000 people who line up and all say the same thing and say, great, we still are going with our security expert. Or they could all agree with our security expert. I'm not saying that 36 people or 35 people are going to make the difference for me. I'm just saying, do we want to give the public a chance to be heard on this issue?
Mrs. Best.
Thank you. Just to add to what Tara was saying, as far as it is a significant expense, and we're also talking about 7 FTEs, which we then will be carrying forward into next year's budget. I mean, this is a sizable commitment that we're making financially. As far as having an opportunity for a public hearing, to my way of thinking, I'm less interested in counting who's for and who's against. I think that there is an opportunity for us to understand better what the public's concerns are, what their hopes are for this position, so that we can then do it the best possible way. There's a big piece of this that we've discussed that's about making people feel safer. And so to understand what is making them feel safer, or what they're worried makes them feel less safe if we move forward with this proposal, then I think we're able to make our decision that we need to make with the expert recommendations that we're receiving, but also then consider the nuances and the ways to make it work the best way it can for our community.
No, I think this board has had public hearings, public discussions on different things. If you're asking me my opinion on it, I would share with you. And I was the one who suggested a timetable, so I accept responsibility for it. The one area that I tend to think if ideas sort of resonate with you, then there's some merit to it. And the one area is potentially that we have an opportunity. We appreciate and acknowledge it has to come out the way it comes out quickly, but can we have an opportunity to process it? So I would understand that is a reasonable concern and question from the public. Do we need more time just to have an input into it and just have a reflection on it? But at the same time, then it's a board decision if you just want to do that.
Yeah, I personally think we've gone through the process in executive session. I think Alan has gotten a communication out to the community ahead of a meeting. I think we're in our second meeting and a full discussion on this. And even in public comment this evening, there just was not that many public comments around it, for or against it. There's a couple of concerns. There's a couple of handfuls of email. I don't know what more we could do to get the information out there. All the information roles. I had a conversation today with someone that, once they went on the website and looked at roles and responsibilities and what we presented, they're like, a lot of work has gone into this. So, we can go around the room. I don't know if anyone wants to. I am not in favor from a security standpoint. And I know it's a tight timeline, but I think we've got the professionals involved, from the chief of the police to the superintendent. I think the work's been done. We'll continue to learn. We'll continue to listen to the community, but I have confidence in executing this. And I think the more you delay it, the more you open it up to more conversation and the folks that you don't want listening. And it'll take enough time to get this implemented once we move forward with it. So, Mr. Brown.
Yeah, I would just reject the premise that this is a change in culture. I think the health, safety, and well-being of our students has always been the top priority of this board. And so I don't see this being a shift at all.
Mr. Senior.
So I'd like to just move on to the finances if I could.
Sure.
Regarding the appropriation request, I get the idea of transparency, but I think when we move, I'd like to make a motion after I clarify myself, but that we make a appropriation request for half the year, to match the actual costs, not request more than return. I think we've been more than transparent that this is going to be an annual cost. You will be doing that in front of the Board of Finance as well as the RTM. So I don't think there's a need to request a full year appropriation and then hand back any excess funds. So
it's a good point, Mr. Sini. So I'm in agreement with going for an appropriation based on what we need to finish out the year, based on when you think you'll be doing the hiring. And then Rich, I'm assuming as you start, we're going to talk about kind of the budget calendar later in the meeting, but then these folks will be built into the budget that you're building now.
So they'll be reflected essentially as like a new request because they're not part of the original appropriation. So when you see the budget for fiscal year 24, you'll see essentially seven new FTEs.
Right.
Yeah.
So can you give us the figure, if we cut that figure in half? I mean, is it 250,000?
So, well, not quite, but so if you assume they start the first week of January, which is really what we're targeting, it'd be about 296,000. So we'd be assuming that they wouldn't be paid for the equivalent of 81 days. The materials are 100% of the cost. You don't have any savings on purchasing a weapon or a bulletproof vest, things like that. But the salary would be less than the benefits would be less.
So all in
296.
296. Thank you.
Not including equipment.
Including equipment.
Including equipment.
So can I ask a question on
Sure,
the
Mrs.
motion,
Simon.
just to Mr. Rudel? So if we do that and we fund them from January 1 to June 1, are we asking those employees to sign a 6-month contract because we won't have a approved budget necessarily yet?
So
Does that
unaffiliated-
cause any hiring issues? Is sorry, what I'm trying to get.
Well, I'll defer to Marge on the hiring issues. The unaffiliated employees don't have contracts. So they would be hired with the anticipated start date of January 1st. And then like everybody else's position, it would be contingent on continuing upon budget approval.
Chief, while you're here sitting patiently listening, anything you'd like to add to the conversation?
One topic.
Sure, thank you.
I will try to speak up. My wife is my, fiercest critic and my greatest supporter. And she said, I don't speak loud enough when I come to the Board of Education. If she's watching at home, I'm doing my best here to not shout like Steven Tyler, but I'm going to fill the room. As Dr. Adley knows and this board knows through executive session discussions, there are many things that we cannot discuss when it comes to school security or overarching security that are matters not known to the general public. Be that as it may, I am willing to speak to any resident, pro or con, for this program as to my thoughts generally on school security officers. I don't hide. You know where to find me. I'm at 25 Hecker Avenue. Send me an email. Stop in for a cup of coffee. We'll have that discussion. Like I advised the board in the prior meeting, I am not a public policy maker here. I do not hold the purse strings. That gives me the luxury of having the experience to come in here and give you my best advice so the public policy makers can make an informed decision on how you want to proceed.
Thank you, Chief. Yes, Mr. Sini.
I was just going to see if we can make the motion.
Sure. So do we need to amend this dollar amount?
You can just make it a motion.
296, Rich? Yep. All right. So may I have a motion to request a special appropriation from the Board of Finance in the amount of $296,000 to fund the hiring of a district director of security and 6 armed school security officers with any unexpended balance returned to the town's general fund. So Mr. Sini, second by Mr. Brown. All those in favor? That's Sini, Best. That is everyone. All right. Thank you, everyone. Good discussion. I would ask that we continue to focus on questions or comments we get from the public, and that we continue to answer those questions. I think Dr. Adley was a good question asked by Mrs. Worm or Mrs. Parent. I think an understanding of the rollout, the training, the introduction to the schools, the look and feel. I think that's all important to these neighborhood schools. But I also am confident with the recommendation from the professionals and the chief that we've got to stay focused on the safety and the security of our students and our staff. So thank you for all the hard work behind that. Mr. Brown.
What information will be discussing the capital appropriation?
Yes. Yes. Thank you. All right. Next, I'll open up to any questions around the infrastructure. I think we've discussed that as to what we're trying to do there. Any questions or comments around that before I make a motion? May I have a motion to request a special capital appropriation from the Board of Finance in the amount of $335,000 to fund security infrastructure related to expanding the district's door security. Mr. Maroney, second by Mrs. McCammon. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you all very much. We'll move on to presentations and discussion. There's another.
Thank you, everyone.
Another mouthful. Further discussion and possible action on proposed revisions to board policy series 6,000 instruction, 6110 school year calendar, 6210 curriculum adoption and revision, 6220 curriculum guides and course outlines, 6230 program assessment, 6310 teaching about religion, 6320 health education, 6330 family life education and instruction on AIDS. Proposed new policies 6330 curricular exemptions, 6340 career and vocational education, 6350 programs for exceptional children. Proposed new policy 6350 policy for the equitable identification of gifted and talented students, 6360 homebound instruction, 6370 summer school, 6410 student organizations, 6420 student publications, 6430 intramural programs, 6440 interscholastic programs, 6450 continuing education programs, 6510 class size, 6520 independent study, 6610 instructional materials, and 6620 instructional materials, use of copyrighted materials. So that's a lot. I know it's been out there, but I will turn it over to Mrs. Achman and Ms. Sion.
So the policy committee did a full review of all of these policies. We went through repealing, requesting, replacing. We have almost been out of meeting for 2 weeks. I have not heard anything back on these. I know there was a first read last meeting. Still haven't heard anything back, so I'm assuming that people are satisfied. And I know it went through legal review with our attorneys as well. So I think it actually is putting us in a good stead in terms of a policy area to be up to date.
Good. Thank you for all the work on that. Mr. Brown.
Just a question. Thank you.
It's been 2 weeks, but please hit me. I know you weren't there. Go.
I wasn't. Just looking at 6610, which is the instructional material selection and adoption. So we struck administration, designated curriculum committee, and replaced that with the district curriculum leadership team. Just a question as to why the district curriculum leadership team versus the curriculum committee, and just the composition of the district curriculum leadership team.
So we did have a robust conversation about that. The language in the policy was always meant to and refers back to the district curriculum leadership team, which we had delegated to. We felt that the wording in the policy made it sound like it was the Board of Ed curriculum committee, and that was causing confusion. So we asked that it be very specific, the actual correct name of the committee that was doing it.
So this is staff committee, not.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Mr. Senior.
Yeah, just point of clarification. There was a question last week in your absence about the minimum class size. We asked.
So we did add language to make it clear that Alan has the authority to go below.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Good. Everyone's all right with that. I prefer not to read through all those numbers again. May I have a motion to approve the board policy changes as recommended by the board policy committee and as discussed and reviewed at December 27th Board of Education meeting. Mrs. Best, second by Mrs. Achman. All those in favor? Thank you. Thanks for all the work on that. Policy work is never ending, so thank you. We will move forward on presentation and preliminary discussion on regular Board of Education meetings for the 2023 calendar year. Dr. Adley.
Yes, the regular board meetings, the one we had pointed out is March 15th. The 14th is a Board of Finance statutory date for a budget public hearing, so I'm anticipating we will not have a meeting on the Tuesday. So a question is whether you'd want to have the meeting on Wednesday or not, but otherwise the meetings are as presented on the memorandum. This is the first reading, so if you want to take it under consideration, certainly that's what we would do.
Questions, comments? All right, so that will come up next if any further questions or comments as everyone continues to look over it. All right. We'll move on to preliminary discussion of the 2023-2024 budget meeting calendar. Dr. Adley.
So again, the budget calendar for the upcoming fiscal budget is presented. There are dates that we have to work with the town on. They come out just a wee bit later in the process. If there's anything that you notice here and processes that we've used before that worked or didn't work, I would ask the board to, we've gone through this as closely as we think we should have and correcting anything or catching things, but otherwise I'd ask you to do the same and to see if there's anything that's outstanding. Again, there's just certain dates that we get from the town that's just a wee bit later on in the process and we'll fill those in.
Thoughts or comments from the board on the proposed budget calendar? Yes, Mr.
Just
Maroney.
a question on Tuesday, the 10th, we have meeting with Board of Finance, RTM and Budget Committees, question mark. And then on the 17th, we have comments from Board of Finance. So what is the difference between the question marks and the comments?
Where are you, Mr. Moran?
Sorry, January 10th, there's a meeting with Board of Finance, RTM, Education and Finance Budget Committees, question mark, question mark. And then January 17th, it's comments from the Board of Finance and the RTM. So I'm curious as to what the difference is and why the double question.
Well,
Nadine hit the
yeah,
question mark
well,
twice.
It's there every year.
It's there
It's there every year.
But honestly, I think from the RTM point of view, it's very difficult to have the meeting. I mean, and then they'd have to meet Monday to formulate questions and report back on Tuesday, the 10th. So to me, that's awfully early for them. And I would propose the 17th to have the comments, but my opinion.
We've heard that multiple times from them, that it's
Yeah.
tricky for them to do that quick turnaround.
Go ahead, Mrs. McCammon.
Have we run this by the Board of Finance or the RTM? Could we just send it to them, ask them to say, does this calendar work for you?
we certainly can do that. We've never done that before.
Yeah, I would do that. And then, because I think this has happened before where dates get tight or we're jumbled up. And we also have been trying to be efficient, and the RTM subcommittees have done a nice job of trying to work with us and combine their questions and meeting time with us so that you and Rich and the cabinet and board members are not out several nights a week going through this process. So let's show it to them and get some feedback so we can build the right schedule. Marge, anything on the personnel report? No. Okay, we will switch back to public comment. Michelle,
Is there anyone in person?
are you, okay, good.
If anyone in Zoom has
Anyone in
public
Zoom?
comment, please raise your hand. There are no raised hands at this time.
Okay. Before we adjourn, I just want to thank the board, thank the administration for all the hard work. These are tough, challenging conversations. There are a lot of viewpoints. There's a lot of information out there. I want to thank the parents and the public for their comments. Please keep those comments and questions coming so we can get them all answered as we continue to move through this process. Our focus is always on the health and well-being and security of our students and our staff. But hearing from the public and continuing that conversation is important. So thank you. With that, may I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Best, second by Mr. Brown. All those in favor? Thank you. Have a good